Good morning, my magnificent ones. Welcome to Tea with Sue. I'm Sue Paulson, your magnificence mentor, and I have such a treat for you today. I have a guest. So my guest today, her name is BB Harding. She and I met through this cool group that we're both part of called Groundswell University. And I wanted to have a chat with her today because she has some particular wisdom and insights and a cool life story that I wanted to share with you. So before BB and I get started, I'm just going to give you a little bit of her bio. She's led a pretty interesting life. So BB has been, she started out wanting to be in her first career. She wanted to be a priest from an early age. Well, that didn't turn out as she had hoped. And so she did some exploration in a variety of things, ended up in IT for nearly 40 years. But that wasn't all she's done with her life. She's one of those women who has many fingers in many pies, I would say, that she has such a broad scope of interest, and spirituality has been one of them. She has been coaching for many, many years, and when she was in her 60s, she decided to get certified in the coaching arena, which is always kind of fun to get a certificate after you've done all the work for all those years anyway. So she's an author. She has a book out called Essential Oil Wisdom, and she also collaborated with a group of people and some horse avatars to create a card deck called Messages from the Ridge. So we're going to find out a little bit more about that in a bit. And she's busy working on 2 more books. So we'll have a little chat about that as well. So welcome, BB, to Tea with Sue. It's such a pleasure to have you join me today.
Well, thank you, Sue. It was a real pleasure to be invited for tea. And I'd like to share with you a reflection that I had this morning, if that's acceptable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I realized that this is probably the first, what I would call formal tea that I've had in a long time. That years ago, I had a friend named Susan, believe it or not. Oh. And she was the one that introduced me to things like high tea. And whenever I visited her, she and her husband, Doug, we always had time in the afternoon when we had a tea time. And then when she and I traveled a couple places together, and we actually made arrangements to go attend high tea at, one of the places that's appropriate for that. So it's really, really brought back some very fun memories, this morning when I was thinking about it. I hadn't thought about that for a long, long time.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, it's my pleasure. And it brings up those memories for me as well. When I was a kid, I think there was one particular birthday party I had when I was maybe 8 or something, and I could have 3 other little friends. And my mom put out this tea spread for us, and so we
wow.
And of course we were all dressed up, and I'm sure that we had hats and all of that. So there's something quite old-fashioned and lovely about having tea. So I guess maybe that's why I enjoy doing Tea with Sue, because it just keeps that spark alive of just time to relax and chat and just kind of let the world do what the world's doing. So
yeah, whatever that might be.
Whatever that might be, absolutely. So I mentioned to you earlier, and I'm going to mention to my listeners, if you hear pounding and banging coming through your speakers on your computer, it's because they're erecting some scaffolding right up in front of my windows, and I don't know if they're done yet or not. I still hear noises, so I apologize if there's a little distraction in the background as we move forward. So, BB, you and I come from a similar era. So we're baby boomers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
such an interesting time. It seems like more than one lifetime ago, going through the 50s and the 60s and so on. Well, you've developed a life view that I share with you. You mentioned at one point that you have this abiding belief that the universe or the world, let's talk about the world. The world is a friendly place. And I share that with you. I feel the same way. Now, how did you come to believe that or feel that?
That wasn't easy.
Right.
Yeah, it took a long time and a lot of reflection. And I would say that, it's kind of like, having these little nuances. Now, I think Abraham Hicks was probably one of my first exposures to somebody who talked regularly about, what the universe wants. Caroline Myss was somebody else that I followed, when she first came out in particular. And, I started getting the information, at least, that, to start looking at things in a different way. Abraham Hicks and themselves, used to talk about that, the soul chooses, and, a lot. And, there was a lot of times where I went, I'm not so sure about that. But, just beginning to listen and integrate the thoughts that, there was something on that. And then it was like really wanting to believe that it was possible that the universe really did care about me. And I know, like, in the last, couple of years, there's been a real transition where I can feel a relaxation in my body that, yes, the universe does have my back. And yes, it doesn't necessarily manifest itself the way that I think it should. But, at the same time, it's like having a recognition. And the biggest thing to learn from me has been about divine timing. That's been I think, probably the single largest lesson.
Oh,
And I know,
sure.
yeah. But what, from your perspective, I'd be interested in hearing how you came to a similar thought.
Well,
Since I have so many friends who don't believe that.
well, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, you look out at the world and what's going on, and there's so much that you say, oh, the world doesn't feel friendly at all. And yet, I guess for me, when I think about that whole notion, there was a lot of opportunity when I was younger to feel it, and it was more of a knowing for me at some point. Like I guess because I'm a highly optimistic person by nature, it seemed easier to fall into that. And I guess when I combine two things, the world is a friendly place, and I have power in the world, that helps me get where I want to go. And you're right. I was chuckling about when you said about the divine timing, because I'm an impatient sort of person. And my timing is usually very different than what the universe wants. And yet, a lot of the world is a friendly place idea comes from a retrospective perspective for me, where I look back and I say, whoa, that happened and that happened and that happened. And I mean, I'm fond of doing, I don't know if you do this, but I'm fond of doing a bit of a life review where I look back and see how the pieces of my life fell into place. And I've been in awe of really how magically it just all was orchestrated, and all for my highest good. So I guess that's how I came to that perspective. And I guess regardless of what's going on in the world, because sure, quotes, bad things happen, and bad things happen to each of us, but in the whole scheme of things, somehow I guess I still cling to the idea of the silver lining in every cloud, and even if the clouds are very, very dark and you don't see a silver lining, at some point the sun is going to shine and then a rainbow will appear. And so.
Yeah, and that takes some real mindset work, to look at to find the positive in things. I know, like, part of one of the things that I work with people on is rewriting the narrative. And I encourage people to find the blessing in, or what the gift was of the situation. And, that can be very eye-opening, and especially, I love the word that you used, orchestrated, because it's one that I use also, where it's like there are things that have been orchestrated in my life that it would be hard pressed for me to say, well, yeah, I ordered it. It's just like that. But, at the same time, it's like things really having the grasp and understanding, like, I got fired from 2 jobs. And, both of them at the time that I got fired were things that totally meaningful to me. One of them was in human development, and, very on the cutting edge of the spirituality. It was very similar to the very popular S movement and what have you. And what I didn't want to recognize was that it was an incredibly toxic environment for me. And the universe actually moved me out of that. Now, at the time, I did not like that. So it wasn't a matter of, in that moment, I was enlightened and going, oh yes, the universe is taking care of me, moving me right out of there. Isn't that nice? That was not where I came from. And the second time was, a company that I had been very instrumental in helping to build the division that I was in at the time. And we brought in somebody new, and he took and moved me. And again, it was kind of like, an aspect of me recognized it was my awakening time.
Right.
And it's like, can't shoot the messenger, for moving me out of there. But at the same time, internally, it was devastating.
Yes.
So.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But at the time, I didn't think it was very friendly.
No. Well, and because we have this tendency to take things personally. And how else can we take them but personally? Except that at some point in our lives, don't you find that if we sort of distance ourselves from, it's like having that observer who's up here looking at the scenario, inside we might be feeling crushed and broken and all of that, and yet there's this observer up there saying, well, no, let's just pull back and have another perspective here. And I had a similar, got fired from a job when I was in my 20s, and it was devastating, because of course getting fired was a terrible thing when you were a young person. And there was a lot of shame involved, and guilt, and so on. And for me, it was a lot of anger, because I'd been planning to quit. It got to me before I got to them. Well,
I have to confess to the same thing too. And then thinking that, I've been getting signals that it was probably time to think about moving on. But the fact that it happened the way that it did.
Exactly. Well, and now, I have great gratitude for that company, because that one thing that happened propelled me into the personal growth arena, which I didn't even really know anything about at that time. And it opened up my world and my life and my whole internal being in a way that couldn't have, had I kind of stuck with that traditional working path that I was on. And so it was, when I saw that, I thought, oh, wow. So it goes, it's like, I think I've seen some of these little stories where the monks will say, oh, they'll be talking about a young monk who's saying, oh, if that happens, that would be bad. And then the wise monk says, well, maybe, and then flips it around. And, well, oh, that could be good. Well, maybe, and then flips it around. So
yes.
It's all perspective, isn't it? And makes it.
Well, it's said that, the thing that happens to us is the meaning that we ascribe to everything. So it's like, if we can learn to change the meaning, and this was one of the things that I found very interesting, was discovering that, if I could change my perspective on something, it changed my whole outlook on the event. And I didn't that didn't seem like it was a possibility before I started doing that.
No.
You know, I mean, I would have never thought that, oh, well, you can tell a little different story about it, you know, and then it changes the whole whatever happened to you. And it was like, what?
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think that from looking back on childhood events, that
Yeah.
can make such a difference in our lives as we're getting to a certain point, because I don't know about you, but I seem to for many years have carried this sack full of resentments and bitterness and crap out of the past that related to other people, that and loved ones, some of them. And then when I started to reframe and refocus on each of those events or people or whatever it was, I came to realize, wait a minute, this could be different. This doesn't need to play out the way I think I remember it, because of course in my own mind, oh well, I remember it crystal clear. And yet,
Crystal clear from your perspective.
yeah, from my perspective, enough years go by, and quite frankly, maybe I'm not that crystal clear in what I think. So to be able to kind of revisit that, I found it fascinating how it takes the sting out of that event, and and you mentioned this. Is that what you mean when you say looking at changing the narrative?
Yeah, it's like rewriting the story, you know, from a different perspective. So that's exactly what I mean. It's like instead of telling yourself story A, you suddenly look at it and start telling story B.
Ah,
And
sure.
and if you can tell story B, where what you do is recognize the gift and the blessing, you know, that transpired, you've got a whole new story with a completely different outcome, and
Oh,
you know, it can be very liberating.
oh, absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely. Well, and I can remember doing this, that particular kind of exercise one time in relation to my mom, who I lost when I was 17. And
Mm,
and you would think, well, when you only have a person in your life for 17 years, you wouldn't get as much from them as if you had somebody for, 45 years. But it was so fascinating because we didn't have the easiest of relationships. And what I found though was every point of what I felt was pain in relation to her, the gifts that came out of that were so significant that when I
mm,
looked at the gifts, I'm going, wow, I had no idea that my mom had such a positive impact on my life. Now, were they hard things to go through at the time? Yeah, they were, because I was young and trying to figure things out. And of course, we had the typical teenage daughter, mother angst that that can happen. Well, now I feel so blessed by what she left me with, because it was big, it was huge, and it has served
yes.
me, all the rest of my life so far. So yeah, so I understand what you're saying, and so it is a recommended thing for people to do. Would you not say, if you're doing some inner reflection and wanting to grow?
Well, it definitely impacts personal growth. I find that it also gives. I'm just gonna. What pops up is kind of like a new lease on how you approach things, because if the way that you perceived it was that you were being beaten down, and then you rewrite the story, and you find out actually that there was, you know, a support system that was in place, or that there was something that was being molded within you that was going to be a character essence that, you know, helped you to succeed or something like that, you suddenly start approaching things from a little differently. It's like suddenly you have evidence to the contrary of what you believed, and it helps to change the mindset. And once you do that, then you can approach things a lot differently than what you did before. You know, so a big one is that, you know, our fears, you know,
Mhm.
of course, you know, as we can, you know, I think about, you know, a fear is a very useful thing. You know, it's meant
Oh
to save
yes.
meant to save our butts, you know.
It does.
It does. But the problem that I know I've done, and I've seen it, you know, with other people, is the fact that we've equated things to the saber-toothed tiger. You know, we've equated the fact that, you know, I've gotten into a room where I don't know anybody, to a saber-toothed tiger coming after me, you know, or, you know, I can't do this because it's a saber-toothed tiger, you know, coming after me.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're having to, you know, kind of step down the saber-toothed tiger and put it in its place. And, you know, so doing the mindset work so that we can approach things differently is huge.
Oh, well said. Absolutely. I love that. And I was reading recently where they were talking about those kinds of reactions as well. That's just a chemical reaction that we're naturally wired for. And if we make allowance for that, but then go beyond that, oh my God, I'm so scared. Then I worked with this with lots with people with public speaking who were just terrified to get up and speak. And I'm noticing that fear is the big elephant in the room. So we would address the fear first and say, all right. And I asked teachers who ask their students to give presentations about grade 7, I think. And I said, well, do you help your students learn how to, you know, calm down and breathe and so on, and before they get up and, you know, or do you just give them the assignment and tell them to go with it? And this is grade 7, right? And she says, oh, we just give them the assignment and tell them to go with it. And I'm going, no wonder I get adults who are beyond terrified, because
They'll get called upon.
yeah, they're just thrown into the deep end with no tools, no life preserver, nothing, at one of the most vulnerable ages and stages of life. And I'm going, oh, that's not fair. And so anyway, that's what I would.
I didn't know. So you help people with speaking? I didn't know that you did that.
Oh yes, in one of my
many hats. Okay.
One of my many hats, absolutely. Well, when I was teaching business communications at college and university, I taught. So the textbook was part business writing and part public speaking. And I'm teaching accounting students, if you can imagine.
Oh, I can't imagine.
The last place they want to be is at the front of the room. And I'm thinking, well, I guess if I can have some success with these folks, we'll learn something. And so I learned a lot in working with them and helping them move through their fears and kind of get them ready to, because I said, look, you can run, but you can't hide anymore. Every work scenario that you're going to be presented with is going to require you to say something, share your expertise, provide information, or be part of the discussion or the dialogue. And I said, we need your voices. You know, it's not okay to be silent, because you cheat us of the brilliance that is you if you don't do that. And so and here's step by step how to work yourself out of that. And, you know, will you be the most brilliant orator ever? I don't know, maybe if you choose. But at least you won't, your knees won't be knocking quite so hard the next time you go to ask the boss for a raise.
Yeah, or have to make the presentation in front of the chair, you know, yes. Chairman of the board and the whole board.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. A daunting task. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I had another question that I was curious about, BB, and you talked about how the world could change if people recognize that there was an innate wisdom in all things. So what do you mean by that? How does that present itself to you?
Yeah, so for me, that's been like the unfolding of the last several years. My first introduction to the concept that there was an intelligence and things that weren't human was probably the Paralanda process. And I lived with somebody who was using the Paralanda process on her property. And what I learned about was the founder of Paralanda is Michelle Small-Wright. And what she started doing was gardening with nature's intelligence. And it was something that she kind of fell upon, in her life, but she was very, very committed to the process, and she still has the place today. And it's in Jefferson, Virginia. Still has a place where she gardens with, nature's intelligence. She talks about Pan, and then she also talks about the different nature spirits and what have you. But it's like using the energy of the garden to like when to plant. So it's kind of like an expanded farmer's almanac, kind of thing, but like when to plant, how to plant, care for it. And to this day, she's got a garden that she uses no fertilizers, no chemicals of any kind, and has a harmonious relationship and balance, with the natural surroundings. And she talked about, her first experience of, having the bugs in the plants, and then, very carefully walking them to the other side, and then discovering, through nature communicating with her, letting her know that she could start talking to them. And so made arrangements like, this part of my garden is for you. And so the bugs, had that part of the garden, and the agreement was they got this part of the garden and it was well tended for them, and they left the rest of the garden alone, kind of thing. So that was probably my first exposure to the idea. And of course, the thing that Michelle did was, made flower essences. And so, I also learned about making flower essences and what have you, and that, things are vibration, so the vibratory rates, can have an impact on whatever it is that's going on around you, like you can, Bach flower, I should say Bach flower, that, are well reputed, for people who take them. Essential oils, people use them, for guidance. And then my next, as my evolution went, one of the things that happened for me was suddenly one day I was working with essential oils. I grabbed one, and all of a sudden I started getting a message. Now that wasn't normal for me. And it was like, okay, so I was writing like crazy, to write it down. And I grabbed 4 oils and I did that. And then I did it the next day and the next day. And if you were to read over my shoulder, you'd see things like, oh my God, I can't believe this is still working, But what was communicated to me was I feel like I was a translator for them to bring in an understanding of their spiritual components of using the essential oils.
Right.
So instead of just the physical application,
Uh-huh.
and the emotional, where you can smell it and things, was like getting an understanding that, like, if you got lavender, for example, it was an invitation to step into the bigger picture of things, to see the bigger picture, not just, what you, as we were talking about earlier, not just my perception of reality, but looking at what the full perception was, that frankincense is about speaking your truth. So it was, learning that what they wanted to communicate. And does this all make sense to you?
Oh, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So for me, when I bought my house here, the one that I'm living in, the one that I feel like I'm custodian for, I know that I had the conversation with her name is Stella. And I had the conversation with Stella about, was she willing to accept me as her next caretaker? Rather than just, well, I bought the house, man,
Right.
having the conversation. And then, learning, like, for example, need to paint the porch. And it's like, well, what color would you like to be painted?
Mhm.
And what have you, as opposed to, things that I don't normally think about, or I was not accustomed to thinking about, let's put it that way.
Right.
So it's suddenly, and if you start approaching life, or at least what I found, if you start approaching life from that perspective, that you can learn something from everything, that's, for me, has been a hugely different thing. And it has brought a lot of things into question. One of my first experiences after I got my mission upgrade was an experience with the mice at the place where I was living. And, I knew from my Paralanda experience that I could communicate with the mice.
Sure.
And, and what have you. And then it was like, well, what boundaries do I want to set? So, it was like, okay, all right, we're going to set the boundary. I don't want you in bed with me. Thank you.
No running across the pillow.
yeah, not running across the pillow. Thank you. But, I didn't particularly like the fact that they were up on the countertop and leaving their little mouse doo-doo all over the place. Yeah. And so, I asked them to please not do that. But that they could run around on the floor, that I would not go after them if they were running around on the floor. Sure. But, I had to ask silly questions in some people's minds, because I had one person that just told me you ought to kill them. And I was going, well, wait, if my mission is to bring all of creation to communion, I can't go around killing things,
Yeah.
And so, or at least that was the way I interpreted that. I, started looking at questions like, well, what gives me the right to say that I'm entitled to live in this house by myself and you mice are not allowed?
Right.
It was like,
Sure.
what, okay, what's the hierarchy here? Oh, I'm human, so I think I'm better, and right. it so, I mean, it begs a lot of different questions. And I just look at it as it's a huge component of respect that's involved. And I really
Sure.
feel that respect is one of the things that's lacking in our everyday environment. Is we have very little respect for the things that we do, for other people, for the environment around us. And I'll tell you, I'm still learning. I'm still learning.
Don't you find that the more you delve into things, the more doors open up, and you realize, well, really, I don't know anything compared to what there is to know. And I mean, I go through that lots, where the more years I have on planet Earth and the more I'm curious about things, the more I realize that, well, actually, I'm not sure that I know much about anything, because there's just so much more. So
well, isn't there a saying that goes something like, the more I know, the less I know?
I think
so something along those. I know that that's true for me. Is
yeah.
As soon as I think I know it all.
That's right. I seem to have known a lot. I seem to have felt that I knew a whole lot more many years ago.
Yeah, I mean, these days I feel pretty not so smart in comparison to where I was many years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the word that comes to me, Bibi, when you talk about this respect for all of everything that's on the planet, is reverence.
Nice word.
And I think of listening to a couple of interviews now and again with the Dalai Lama, and how they asked him, well, like, would you, so you don't kill insects and all of this kind of thing. And he did say, he said, well, I confess, he says, I'm not that fond of mosquitoes. So it sounded as if he might have succumbed to ending a mosquito or two's life. Yeah.
I like to see God.
Yeah. So, well, that's fascinating, isn't it?
I like the word reverence. I often use the word honoring also.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That it's an honoring of what it is that's around you. And the more that I do something like that, one of the keys that I find is honoring my own self. Yes. Is absolutely imperative. And yes. And if talk about a road to really hoe here, learning to honor myself, I would say has probably been the single largest lesson. And respecting the fact that learning, in human design we talk about the 3 line, that they're meant to learn by doing, and they never make a mistake. And that's the thing they need to learn, is that they have to be like Thomas Edison. Like, I didn't find 10,000 ways where I failed. I found 10,000 ways not to make the light bulb, right. Yes. And that kind of a thing. And it's like being able to encourage people to, and have that compassion, that self-compassion that says, what I've learned is what I've learned. And, and to have that respect instead of beating myself up for it.
Oh, isn't that right? I'm fond of telling people, look, put your jewel-handled whips away, because this beating up serves no great purpose that I've ever discovered. And that's been my journey too, is to come full circle around to the place that I was worthy of my own regard, that the regard that and the honor and the respect that I gave to everyone else, and for that matter, everything else, I owed it to me too, that I was part of that. I wasn't outside of that. And that shift made a huge difference for me, because then there was more of a peace and almost, because I had more compassion for myself then, it was way easier to give more compassion to other people. So it just grew kind of exponentially, I guess, over time. And so that's, I was given an exercise when I was in my 20s to write down 100 things I liked about myself. Well, if it had been, okay, write down 100 things that you don't like about yourself,
that would have been easier list. Yeah,
I could have had that done really fast. But 100 that I liked, oh, that was interesting. I finally asked some friends, and I said, can you tell me something that's good about me? It seems kind of pitiful to think about it now. And yet I still challenge people when I'm doing workshops with that same exercise, and most people still struggle with it because they've never been allowed to see themselves in the context of, we're always looking to fix something and self-improvement and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm going, no. Well, this is the wrong direction to go.
I don't know about you, but it's like, I feel like I was told more about the things that were wrong with me than the things that were right with me.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, for sure.
And,
yeah.
I mean, I did a similar exercise, and I can remember my list was like, 100. Okay, not so good. In my view, I would have been able to write down the 100 bad things real quick.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And so, well, life has these twists and turns for us, doesn't it?
Well, see, and that's one of the other things too, that I don't know if you're hearing this, but one of the messages that I'm hearing in the universe right now is to be very careful of your language. That it's like, abracadabra, is what I speak comes to, fruition. And it's so, we have that kind of power, and it's like that constant reminder. It's like, my friend is reminding me when I say, don't forget. No, she says, remember. It's not don't forget. It's remember, so it's like, I'll say, don't forget. Oh, wait, remember to, kind of thing. But that's been an exercise that I see is going to occupy my time for a while, is really being careful of the language and setting the vibration and the frequency that I'm constantly using in my everyday life. Instead of, I'm just going to call it dumbing down the energy,
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and when you think of, certainly words have power, and what I think a lot of people don't recognize or have never come across is the vibrational power that especially emotional words have. So I recall reading David Hawkins' book, and he was
Power.
Power versus force, and then he had one beyond that. But in both of them, he was talking about everything from Christ consciousness and the highest calibration, then love, peace, joy, all of those, what we would maybe label positive emotions, and he calls them life affirming. And then but then below 200, things like anger, resentment, fear, shame, guilt, all of those. as less than life enhancing, like
Yeah.
they're life debilitating. And yet how often are we habitually, or you hear people saying, oh, I hate something or other, and you go, or somebody or other, and you go, wait a minute, is that serving you? How is that working in your life? And of course, if there's too much of that going on, then we vibrate below the arena that would be the best for us. And of course, you've heard me talk about the importance of acknowledging our magnificence,
Yes.
as individuals. Well, that's not acknowledging our magnificence. That's taking away from it. It's subtracting from our awareness of that. And so you're right. Words have tremendous power, and the way we put our words together when we communicate with one another can make the biggest difference between having a peaceful, productive interaction and having something just blow up.
I know that that's something that I've always thought about pursuing, is that nonviolent communication. Learning how to do that, because it feels as if, part of what I am here to do is to get people into conversation. And it's like, if we can get into conversation, we can find our likenesses as opposed to our, things we dislike, about each other, or our differences.
Absolutely.
And, when we start finding out how similar we are, it's a completely different, that, people have the same needs, wants, and desires, basically, and it makes no difference where you come from. It's just some of us get there faster than others.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And some take a more direct route, and some have a circuitous path, but the destination seems to be pretty constant in all of it. And you're right. What we share as humans in the the spiritual beings having a human experience is pretty much the same. And sometimes it takes more than one lifetime to
I speak of my friends, and I would say I should have read the fine print of the contract before I came down here.
Yes, I can remember having a few conversations with the universe saying, I didn't sign up for this. I really didn't.
Yeah, I did there.
Show me.
Yeah, show me where I signed on the dotted line for that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can remember going to like channeling sessions where people were talking and being told repeatedly that, the quote, the people on the other side, how eager they were to come down to earth, that they thought it was the most magnificent experience that they could ever encounter, was to be able to have the privilege and the opportunity to come back down to earth. And they were really looking forward to it. And I was going, what? Are you in your right mind?
This is right. Let me talk to them.
I'm sorry. I'm sure you're not hearing them clearly.
You must be mistaken. Oh, I know. I have a friend who he painted this picture of the the astral plane, and he says, okay, there we are in the voodoo lounge smoking cigars and drinking whatever, and okay, next time I'm going to come down as and I want you to be my and I thought, and it was fun and funny to listen to him go on about this as he painted this picture, and yet I couldn't help but feel as if that wasn't that far from how it works. And I thought, I think maybe there might be some to that. From anything I've read or understood, it seems fairly accurate to me, and that because we choose, and sometimes we might say, and why did I choose that again?
Excuse me, what was the reason I did that?
What was I thinking?
What was in that cigar I was smoking?
Right.
So, Yeah, no, I used to have years ago, and it came up when a friend of mine was really going through the fact that her dad did her wrong. And all of a sudden, like this one day, I just had this vision of like, wow, that's really pretty powerful for somebody to be the villain in your life. And just had this picture of, sitting up on a cloud before coming down and saying, I think I want to go down on this lifetime and I want to learn blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to really need to have a villain for that.
Yeah.
Okay. And looking at my friend and going, would you like to be my villain? And that person goes, I love you enough to do that.
Exactly.
And I thought about, for me, this story continued in my mind about, the great love that person had to hold for their lifetime until I would get the lesson that they would have to maintain the consistency of their villainous, whatever that word is.
Yep.
They had to be a consistent villain in my life. And that underneath it, coming from the fact that, I believe that love is the core essence, if we allow ourselves to tap into it, I thought, wow, that's a really powerful gift of love.
Yes.
For somebody to hold that energy just so that we could get that lesson.
Absolutely.
And that has been a picture for me that's been fairly consistent, ever since then. And I mean, that's been years ago.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think that's the way we arrange it. Of course, I sometimes like to resist the idea that, we arrange things, because it's like, well, why would I do that for myself?
Oh, I know. Yeah, I have had more than one of those opportunities to examine that in my life. And strangely enough, once I worked through the heart of it and the head of it and all of that and the spiritual essence of it, I came up with the same conclusion that, yeah, it was all for my highest good, which of course leads us right back to, well, the world is a friendly place. It's here for us. And the universe is here for us. And there's lessons and magic in everything if we're willing to, and gifts, of course, if we're willing to look for it. So,
yes.
Cool.
But that's a key phrase there, being willing to look for it.
Yes, absolutely.
And I've had to, come to terms for me that the willingness to look at things differently is the first step.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. And it's not without trepidation that we begin to seek and to look and to explore. But when you get over that hurdle, I can remember that in the very first personal growth program I ever took, we had an opportunity to look at some of the darkest things about us. And so it was like opening the closet door and you're going to find, demons and monsters and villains pouring out at you. And that's you. And I was scared, I looked at that, I thought, oh, I don't know. But there was a part of me that said, well, but at least I'll know. And when I opened the door, how bad can it be? And so I was willing to open the door, and I opened the door, and much to my great shock, there was me standing there. And there was no horrific, horrible stuff that was going to pour out at me. There was me. And of course I was quite relieved. But what a beautiful gift. And I'm going, whoa, so it's okay to open the door, but how many people seem so bound and trapped because of the way they learn to live their lives as less than human beings, as not worth anything, or in fact the opposite, that they're bad or they're wrong or they're whatever. And they're so afraid to open that door because it would only not only confirm but add to the misery that they already feel about themselves. And I'm going, no, 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 no.
Yeah. And see, the beauty of that, Sue, is the fact that you can say no, 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 because you've opened the door.
Exactly. Oh yeah, yeah. Because I
You
know
know,
what's behind the door.
yeah.
And now, do I know that that's the same for everybody? Not exactly, but I have this belief that it is, that there's this beautiful, magnificent part of that person behind the door, and they just need to see it. And but everybody has to experience that for themselves, of course. And there's times when I like to just wave my magic wand and say, "Oh."
They could be the fairy godmother.
Fairy godmother. Exactly.
To take what your exercise one step further, the way that I heard it was, we had to go through a similar exercise of like, what's the worst thing you've ever done? And then the last question after we had all gone through our angst and what's the worst thing I've ever done was, okay, great. On what page in the newspaper would they print that? That's what newspapers were really big in those days. So, and most of us discovered that, wow, if we even got in the newspaper, we were probably doing pretty good.
Oh yeah.
Nobody had a headliner special.
No,
Yeah.
isn't that right? And back to perspective again, right? It just puts that part of us into perspective and say, well, maybe we made a wrong choice. Maybe we made a big mistake and had to face the consequences of that. But does that make me a terrible person? Well, no, it doesn't.
So see, in languaging and reframing, the narrative, it would be, I made a choice and these are the consequences. You didn't make a mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
You made a choice and you found out what the consequences were. And the question was, did that feel good or not? But you made no mistakes, and that's really hard to grasp. At least it has been for me, that I have made no mistakes in my life, because of course, going back to our list of the 100 good things, 100 bad things, I had lots of mistakes on there.
Exactly. Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
But from the universe's perspective, you've never made a mistake.
No.
It's all been in divine order. It's like, what?
Part of the learning and moving forward, for sure. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So maybe I wanted to ask you, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit.
Okay.
You have show the rest of the audience the horses you have. I made you put your screen up, but there we go. Oh, look at all these lovely horse heads at the top of your. So tell me a little bit about the horses.
Yeah, so those horses that are up there are the horse avatars that a group of us worked with. I had a project. I was getting certified as a true purpose organizational consultant. And one of the things that you had to do in order to be certified was you had to do a small project. Normally, the small project consists of working with a small business, preferably even like a little startup. And what you're doing is you're finding the purpose of the business, and you're finding the purpose of one or two key players. You're aligning them, and and you can do this in large organizations too. What you do then is involve more of the staff. But for the people getting certified, it was basically a small project. Well, I worked like hell to find people that I might work with. I even, for unusual for me, reached out to a couple of people who I thought might be able to give me some names. They couldn't. Well, the group knew that I had done work as an equine gestalt coach. So they jokingly said, well, you got to find the higher purpose of horses.
Oh.
And they had said that at the beginning, that we should, I should find them. But I did my due diligence to get the organization. Well, I ended up having to go back and say, okay, I guess I'm doing the higher purpose of horses. Got approved to do that as my project. So I then reached out to a few of my cohort, people that had also graduated from the same program that I did. And told them what I was doing, and they agreed to support me in that, because what we needed to do was to find the higher purpose of horses using the process. Excuse me, my phone, even though I thought I turned it off, is making noises. Thank you. Anyway, and that was a 14-week process, to find the higher purpose of the horses. In that process, what we did is these were the avatars that each one of us had. So I'm going to, well, actually, I cannot make the picture clearer. I'm just going to go through them. So this one, I always get some of them backwards. So I have to start with, who do I recognize off the top of my head? So this is Wilma Emma, who is the avatar for Ashara. And then this one here, it's like probably if I turned around, I could look at them and say, this one here is, I think, Xanthus, who is Barbara's avatar. This is Painted Two Feathers, which is my avatar. This is, I always get Rowan and Ryder mixed up. I think this one is, I'm probably going to be doing a terrible disservice by misnaming them here. Rowan and Smack. I think this is Ryder and Smack, and this is Rowan. And so Ryder and Smack belong to Ree, and then Rowan belonged to Vicky. And what would happen is we made a commitment after the project was done to meet on a monthly basis. And over the time, what would happen is the horses showed up and invited us to go up to the ridge with them. And then, we would have a meditation where we would work on things. Well, we did this project for 3 years. And during that time, we met every month. What became apparent was that the horses would really like to have a card deck made. And so each of us worked with our avatar to come up with, some of the messages. Well, not some of them, all of the messages that are in the deck. And so each of us has, there's 9 messages from each, Ryder and Smack, because they share their 9 messages, but then there's also 9 messages from the herd. And so we ended up with the deck. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, cool. Beautiful.
Yeah. And the person that did all the artwork was Vicky. And did a really splendid job. And she was also the one that laid out our deck for us. And then, we got them printed. And if you'd like, I always, when I do sessions with people, I give them an opportunity to, pick a card. And if you'd like to.
Oh, lovely.
Which card you'd like. Just
okay. Okay, I'll go higher. That one.
Okay, so I couldn't see where you were pointing because it didn't make it onto my screen.
Oh, okay. So
yeah, getting them aligned too, I think, is not going to be possible because you're split vision. You're on one side, I'm on the other.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Tell me, like, middle finger.
Okay,
middle finger.
On your left hand, is that the index finger, the one next to the index finger, one in between the ring finger and the index finger.
This finger here.
Yeah.
Middle.
Yeah, that one.
So like this card right there?
Yep.
All right. So I'll listen to this. You matter.
Oh.
You bring a refreshing perspective to life's experiences. Your thoughts, feelings, and ways of expression are valuable. It is your birthright. Stand strong in who you are. Hold your boundaries against those who wish to diminish you. Shine bright, you matter. And that's a message for the entire herd.
Oh, lovely. Oh, I love it. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, that exciting. Well, now where can people get your is it called Messages from the Ridge? That's the deck?
That's the name of the deck, is Messages from the Ridge.
Yeah.
There's 2 places that you can go. Well, there's 3 places where you can go.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is we do have a website, that's got just for the card deck called messagesfromtheridge.com. So you can go there, and then that will lead you to either ordering directly from Amazon, or ordering from Vervante Press.
Nice, nice.
And so you can also go to Vervante Press and order directly from them, or you can go to Amazon and order directly from them.
Sure.
That
Excellent.
message from the Ridge.
Oh,
So,
lovely.
yeah.
Oh, well, there are quite a few people that I know that love getting messages from horses and other animals. And so those of you listening, this would be a great gift for you or one of your tribe.
Absolutely. It is a wonderful gift.
Wonderful. So let's just finish this off, BB. We've talked a while, and I think we could talk probably for another couple of hours, but you know.
It's been fun to get to know you a little better too, Sue. So thank you. And I liked what you said at the beginning, that we come from the same era, you know. Baby boomers.
Baby boomers, absolutely. Well, you know, in the 60s, we figured we could pretty much change the world. And actually, I think we have been, and we are. So, and there's a whole whack of us. So we might as well just get on with it and keep having as much fun as we can have in the whole process.
And also, you know, make room for the fact that, what is it? I think we're at the Generation A now, you know, making room for new people and the changes. I have to say that I've seen instances of, you know, the younger children, you know, and even in grade school, you know, young, you know, and some of the causes that they've undertaken, you know, to raise money for this or raise money for that, have just super impressed me.
Oh, no question.
You know,
isn't that right? Yeah. Well, you know, hopefully we've seeded the way, and as we carry on, and I guess the other confirmation that I have about the world being a friendly place is I meet lots of young people who are so filled with this energy and this focus on living a good life and having our planet come back into balance and taking good care of Mother Earth and so on. And I'm thinking, we're in good hands. You know, we're in really good hands because they're thoughtful and focused and they want to do the right thing. And I'm going, yes, we're getting there. So that just kind of makes my heart sing, actually. Well, BB, we'll need to reconvene like this another time. I see that you're in the process of writing 2 more books.
Yes.
And oh, that's a big adventure. The Songs of Equus, One Woman's Journey with the Consciousness of Horse. And then the other one, it looks as if you're not too sure what title to put. Reluctant Messenger, What Do You Do After You've Told the Universe No? I love that. So I'm really intrigued. So you keep writing, and we'll get together again when
Thank you.
One or both of those are ready.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, the horse book, you know, I just realized I could have seen the horses better, you know, if I had looked over on this screen. But I did name them correctly. Wilma, Emma, Xanthos, Painted Two Feathers, Ryder, Smack, and Rowan. So, yes. Yeah, it's my experience of, you know, the horses giving me messages, and you know, here and there, and then there's a small mention of the project at the end of the book.
Nice.
So,
excellent. Oh, well, we'll look forward to that.
Thank you for opening your tea room, you know, and inviting me to it. I have so enjoyed my time with you, and have a great rest of your day.
I will, BB. You as well. And to all my magnificent ones out there, if you're enjoying Tea with Sue, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel. You can hit the like button. Please share with others you might feel would enjoy it as well. And you can always get more Tea with Sue on my free app, The Magnificence Mentor, which you can download from either Android or the Apple Store. Take good care, my friends. You know you are magnificent to just live this life with every fiber of your being. And we'll see you next week. Bye for now.